Welcome to Resilience Redefined. I'm your host, Michael Ostrolenk. This show is about building better humans, institutions, and systems. On the show, I'll be interviewing many different experts from across many different fields, including human optimization, health and fitness, team building, mind-body medicine. In the institutional space, we're looking at different institutions and how we can create new ones, new models and maps, including in medicine, in education, in intelligence community, in law enforcement, in the military, especially in the special operations community. Thanks for being here and enjoy the show.
Today, I'm joined by Talor Stewart, award-winning architect and founder of Conscious Home Design. For over 2 decades, Taylor has helped people design homes that don't just look beautiful, but actively support well-being, connection, and daily life. He's the author of the best-selling book, Conscious Home Design, where he shares a powerful philosophy. Our homes shape our habits, our relationships, even our state of mind. His work helps families create space that reduce friction, increase flow, and make living well more natural. I'm excited to
Mhm.
explore how intentional design can transform not just the home, but people in it. Good to see you, Taylor.
Thanks, Michael. Good to be here. I'm glad we found the time to get together. I really love your work, and I'm happy to dive into this really amazing conversation about everybody knows the mind-body connection, and now we're gonna, dive a little deeper into understanding that mind-body environment connection so that everyone's well supported.
I love that. And as I shared with you offline, a lot of my work is on environmental design and how it affects
Yeah.
consciousness, health, and well-being. And I was so excited to have this conversation with you because this is literally the first one I've been able to have with someone who just does this for a living and just so moved to make sure that people rethink how they live their lives in their physical spaces. Before we jump into like what you do and how you do what you do and help
Yeah.
people think differently about their environments, who's Taylor Stewart and what led you to do what you do now as a conscious home designer?
Sure, yeah. Well, I'm just a guy, and, I have, I I've really enjoyed sort of a bohemian lifestyle and sort of the a life of a creative and sort of a Renaissance kind of, perspective of know something about everything, but no, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
not just know everything about one thing, like, go deep into 1 or 2 subjects, but also, know a little bit about everything else too, so you're not in a bubble, and so um, very much interested in integration,
Mhm.
and being a lifelong learner. And so I always had this interest in jumping in with both feet when I found something that I liked to do. I wanted to almost live and make it a lifestyle. And so um, as a teenager, I ended up uh, leaving high school and traveling and starting my own company. And, I told myself, "Well, I'll go back to school, I'll go to college if there's something I figure out that I wanna do that I need to go to college for, but right now I'm just diving into life because I really wanna get my hands, roll up my sleeves and get engaged." And so, I built a small company and sold it and, was kind of in this, "Well, what do I do now?" stage, in my early 20s, and, and then suddenly, after like a big walkabout, I've been to 49 of the 50 states and all across Canada and places and just was really exploring and adventuring, and then suddenly the light bulb went off. I was like, "Oh, ding! Of course, you're going to be an architect." And
Cool.
and I looked back. They say you connect the dots in reverse. And looking back, I was like, "Oh, it's been there since early childhood." How come no one ever mentioned that to me before? People had suggested I was going to be an artist because I like to draw. People said, "Well, why don't you be a carpenter? You're already a great woodworker, and you've done some carpentry. Maybe you'll be a home builder, kind of a thing." But no one suggested architecture, but when the light bulb went off, it was like, "Oh, of course, that's always been there?" So
Let me ask you a question real quick. Did the light bulb go off in a particular time, a particular location? Were you like in like walking in nature, meditating, going to the bathroom, having dinner? Like, were you thinking about it? Like how did it come to you?
yeah. So it was, that walkabout that I was on traveling North America, lasted almost 2 years.
Nice.
And so there was, a lot of fun. that happened during that time, and there was a lot of soul searching. I did a lot of meditation. I did a lot of drumming, playing music, in drum circles. I did, retreats and camping, a lot of time in nature, and hiking and stuff. And so I was putting myself in both creatively stimulating, but also, inner development stimulating kind of environments, and just trying to stay open, open to the universe, open to flow,
Yeah.
trying to be in the rhythm of life, and in tune, and just asking the question, what do I do? I had my natural desires, things that I wanted, but how to connect those and how that would unfold is a different matter, And so I had a very spiritual outlook, and for a while I was thinking, well, maybe I'll join a monastery, and just meditate for God, kind of a thing. But I knew that I wanted, I quickly realized that I wanted a more creative life than that, and I wanted to be able to, you know, um, do stuff. I thought that maybe I could practice some level of inner detachment and renunciation, but outwardly I knew that I needed to stay engaged in the world, and have relationships and have creative pursuits and things like that. So then it was like, okay, well, what now? And so because I had already built this company and sold it, and I knew that I loved what had been doing, but I knew it wasn't going to be my whole life. It can be a cornerstone of my life, but not the whole life. So um, it may have been, I may have been actually in Mount Shasta, California, when the light bulb went off about architecture, because I had made this, I had been out there in the springtime 2 or 3 years, um, for, camping, and so almost like a, you know, not a ritual, but or pilgrimage, but just, I had some friends out there, and so I'd go. And suddenly it came. And so I had this prayer, like, what will I do? And I felt like I was connected, but I wasn't getting it. It's almost like need to know basis, so I felt like my the universal intelligence, the guidance I was getting from within, or from without, wherever, was like, I remember receiving a message that said, look, um when the time comes for a change in your life, look to the east.
Mm.
And I had been spending a lot of time on the West Coast, all the way from Vancouver down to Hawaii, and traveling around. There was a lot of activity out there, and so I was just like, okay, fine, look to the east, And so then I was like, oh, I'm going to be an architect, and I felt the pull to go east, and so I went east and visited family. I'm an East Coaster originally, and then I started researching schools, and ended up going to college in Boston, and so. Yeah, so it really just slowly unfolded, how that was gonna look. Because I did research schools all over. There was a school in Southern California, but it didn't resonate for me. Although I thought it would have been fun, and it was right for me to do the school back east. So that's a little bit of the adventure, or the unfolding. Interesting question. I
So so once you finish school and tell me how architecture works. You become like a licensed architecture or architect in a particular state or certification. Like how does the profession actually work at a
yeah,
specific level?
it is not an easy path. It's you become a licensed professional, similar to an attorney or a doctor. Um, the path is more difficult than becoming an attorney, but not quite as intensive as becoming an MD. So it's right in between there. Um, like the other professions, it is state by state. You don't get a national license. Um, Although for residential work, I can work pretty much in any state. It's most jurisdictions don't require a license for a home. For larger projects, I will partner with an engineer or something, if it's needed, to get a license, to get a stamp on if it's required by the local jurisdiction. But I work on projects coast to coast. But architecture is it's an apprentice profession, and so you have to put in thousands of hours of elbow to elbow, working underneath another licensed architect, um, before you're even eligible to sit for the exams to get your own license. And so, Seth Godin coined this idea that it's 10,000 hours to get to mastery in your chosen subject, and I think architects are probably in the 15 to 20,000 hour range before they get licensed and are going out on their own.
Oh,
And if you count up school and real world working experience combined, they've got 15 to 20,000 hours already logged in. And then when you get to that point, that doesn't say you're perfect. That doesn't say you're a master. That just says you're competent to go out on your own and practice. You still have to specialize and grow and learn and develop and stuff. So it's a journey. It is a practice. Architecture is a practice, not it's a science, but it's also an art. So yeah, it took a long time. I always knew I'd write a book. Even from my college days. Um, but I didn't expect that it would actually take me 20 years before the book got out the door.
yeah.
If you had asked 25-year-old Taylor what my career trajectory was going to look like, I was thinking, well, I'll become an architect and maybe, 5 years in, I'll get a book out the door, 10 years tops, but it actually took me 20. It's like, the snake sheds when it's time. Some things just, you can't force it. It took me that long for the the methodology to crystallize, to be
Mhm.
able to explain it so clearly and concisely. I wrote a book that anyone could read in an hour and super accessible, even if you have zero design background. I didn't want to write something that was going to be a heavy read full of jargon. That's too boring. And my audience isn't architecture students, for this particular book. I was trying to build a bridge to the non-design communities. That's a little bit about the professional journey there, Michael.
Y Yeah, so, I like to say that there's mind time, body time, and God's time. And, like,
Okay.
our minds
Yeah.
are like, "I want this now," and
Or
God or source or however you wanna frame it, like, "Nah, your ego's fine." And sometimes the
or
body's like, "I'm a little bit slower than how your mind's going," or maybe a little like,
uh-huh.
there's different levels of time. And it just sounds using my framework, sounds like you are very tapped into kinda universal time. Like, there's natural flows that you seem to tap into and allow to play out
Mhm,
life.
mhm. Life, I like to use the surfing analogy, like you can't wrestle the ocean. It's too big and you can't get your arms around it. And even if you try to get your arms around the little piece that your arms are big enough to, it doesn't, it's water, you can't wrestle that. But if you get a surfboard, and time the waves properly, then there's a combination of you showing up and doing your part. You have to use your muscles and your balance and your coordination, but you also have to surrender and let the ocean do what it does. So life is there's a certain amount of proactivity that we have to show up with, but
Mhm.
life is big and you got to surrender. And if you can't surrender, you're going to wipe out every time,
Yeah.
and so I haven't heard the exact way you phrased it of mind time, body time, and God time, but I have found in my own experience, reflecting on those points, when body, mind, and spirit are all aligned. Think of three horses. If I happen to be running, my desire is running in this direction, but my body wants this other thing, and God, if I'm out of alignment, playing tug of war within myself, progress is difficult.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But the times where things sync up and all get in alignment, we're all going in the same direction, fast. I mean, fast, almost instantaneous manifestations sometimes. It's incredible. But those moments, someone says, the harder you work, the more the luckier you get or something. Or there's another thing of like, um, when preparation meets opportunity, and so a lot of, hurry up and wait is another way to say it. There's so many different ways
Right.
to come at that mountain, but yeah, it's just about living a life in tune.
Right. I know. I love that. I love the alignment and the horse kind of metaphor being pulled in multiple different directions and how painful that can be. Um,
Sure. The wipeouts are spectacular, aren't they?
so, how did consciousness um, expose itself to you as a primary driver of home design?
Um, so home design was just my natural aptitude. I always liked to do placemaking and creativity, making stuff. Um,
Right.
the helping it, help rather than just being a pure stylist and being a purist and saying I love these designs, these buildings and architecture, and have it be so focused on style forward or structural, um, the lens to look at it, how to help people have their best life, and being very human centric,
Yeah.
that's just a personal interest. That's just something that I bring as as Taylor, to it, because different architects are going to have their own personal interests and their own backgrounds and perspectives. And so, just like, not all doctors are created equal, not all attorneys are created equal. They specialize within the field of practice. There's so many niches that you can dig into. And so architects are the same way. And so I've chosen, conscious home design because, it goes back to my college days. I wrote a paper in college where I found that you know, architects are a pretty thoughtful bunch, and we really bring a lot of intentionality to our work. We want to anchor every decision that's made in some sort of reason. We're very tied to the cause effect,
Mm.
and so there's whether it be structural or physical, or hey, we're doing this because it's going to keep the rain off, or we're doing this because it's going to not fall down, or we're doing this because it's going to allow people to escape in the event of a fire. Like every design choice has a purpose. Um, but I found that although buildings were highly intentional, in school, I found that a lot of them were still unconscious, from a perspective of who the people are. Like we had this problem with sick building syndrome and the air quality being bad. And I was like, my goodness, sometimes we're actually building, like compared to being homeless, having shelter, architecture increases life expectancy. Having a place to prepare nutritious food, a place to wash and bathe for sanitation and hygiene, these things help us live a longer, healthier life. So architecture is a huge step up from primitive shelters. But that said, there are ways where I was seeing architecture and I said, "My God, there's no doubt in my mind that sitting in this box for the majority of a person's life shortens their life expectancy." You know, beyond, and so I said, "Well, how can we just push the envelope?" And because we didn't evolve in architecture, we evolved in nature, the human organism, right? And so no matter how beautiful a home is and how peaceful it feels, your home is your sanctuary, it's your temple compared to the chaos of the outside world. Yes.
Mm. Mm.
However, it's still an unnatural environment,
Mhm.
and so you can show 1,000 people a picture of beautiful architecture, and they may all say, "Hey, you're right. It's beautiful architecture." Whether it's their taste, their personal taste or style or not, it doesn't matter. They can all agree, sure, it's well designed, but it doesn't have the same physiological effect on them. If you measure their responses, their brain, their heart rate, their breath, their breathing. Whereas if you show those same 1,000 people a nature scene,
Mm.
with a bunch of green growing things,
Yeah.
then they all say, "Yeah, it's beautiful." They may say, "Oh, I prefer a mountain. Oh, I prefer a beach." They may have, again, personal preferences, just like with the architecture. However, the 1,000 people, assuming they're normal, healthy people, will all, regardless of if that nature scene is their personal preference, will show reduced spikes in the brain waves. So, calming, getting to a more flow state. Their breaths will become more deep rather than the shallow breathing, and the heart rate, you can achieve a resting heart rate more quickly and easily. and that can reduce blood pressure and lower stress. We know that stress is a killer. And so seeing nature, is even if you're not aware of it, it calms you. And that's one of the reasons why we like to get out into nature. We feel so good and invigorated, when we go for that hike or go along the beach or go climb that mountain. We're the all around we're getting sent cues. Hey, you're in your natural environment. It's safe here. You can breathe deep and you can, be your true self. And so I'm asking myself as an architect who's saying, God, people spend half their lives in their home. And if you work from home, you spend 90% of your life in your home. What can we do beyond just making it beautiful? What can we do to create a natural environment? How many plants can we bring in there? What kind of views can we get? What kind of sunlight and exposure can you get so that we actually start feeling, you know, safe at a physical, at an instinctual level, right? Because that's going to really have an impact, especially over years when you compound those tiny little things. They add up.
I mean, I think that's beautiful because considering what you just shared, like there's so many things in conventional homes that can and do detract from health, like literally physical health.
Sure.
The carpets we use, the cleaning supplies we use, you know,
Hmm.
the poor air circulation, or even the poor air sick, what you
Yeah.
call it, sick building syndrome, things along those
Right.
lines. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, Walk us through a little some of the more physical health related things, because I know in your book
Yeah.
talking about like healthy drinking water or water to use in your home, air. You
Hmm.
mentioned some plants already, but how the
Sure.
just water and air.
Yeah. So scientific first principles. So when I wrote the book, Conscious Home Design, I was very clear that I didn't want to write another style guide.
Mm,
There's tons of talented designers out there who have their own sort of style, their own unique way that they put things together, and they create, textures and colors and materials, and they're wonderful. They assemble beautiful collages, and they sort of hold themselves out there as an artist, as a
mm,
designer, a stylist, and you say, hey, you like it, swipe right. You don't like it, swipe left, and no problem. And people choose, based on if they like it or they don't like it, in a second, the image. But I wanted to say, is there anything universal, that's not about, hey, I like green, oh, I like blue, not personal preference, but something that's true for all human beings. And because I assume that when you hire an architect to work with a designer, that you're going to get the style you want. But if, having the coolest outfit in the world by your favorite designer in the perfect color that you like doesn't serve you very well if it's three sizes wrong.
yeah,
It has to fit and not restrict your movement, right? And so I'm looking for things that help people. Everyone's out there saying, "Hey, live your best life," but what does that really mean? That's such a vague term, like happiness. How do you hit that target? Happiness, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. It's like, are we leaving it up to chance? And so until we can define it, you know, like through Maslow's The Hierarchy of Human Needs pyramid, and all these other, Japanese concept of ikigai, right? And life purpose, and integrated living, all of these things, that help us, beyond just physical shelter. So the exploration into conscious home design was, what can we do to actually identify the things that truly make us happy and help us live longer? So from a scientific perspective, so I start with scientific first principles, which says the rule of sevens. Hey, strongest, healthiest person can go potentially 7 weeks without food, 7 days without water, 7 minutes without air. And so that really helps us prioritize what we should be doing to support the human body,
right,
right?
right.
We need air, good quality air, and we need water, good quality water, and we need good quality food. Now, when you go walking along the beach and you breathe that ocean brine, that very oxygen-rich, dense air, it feels good. It's vitalizing. But we get the same thing hiking a mountain. You could be 2 miles up, in the Rocky Mountains, or in the Tetons, and maybe the oxygen is not as dense as it is at sea level, but still you take a deep breath of that mountain air and wow, do we feel invigorated? Yeah? And so, not many buildings that I can think of that I've ever walked into and taken a deep breath and felt energized,
Right. Right.
right?
Right.
So it's kind of like, and I'm a strong believer in fresh air. Like, what would it feel like if the air that you breathed in your home actually was energizing and invigorating, like that nature, like that, wild air that we get. And so, particularly in spaces where we're going to spend a lot of time, like an office, or like a bedroom, right? And so, indoor air quality is vital. And everyone says, "Oh, of course, of course, of course." Yet, 90% of buildings doing it, and so yes, people say it's obvious, but until it's ubiquitous that we actually design that way, I still need to keep letting people know, hey, remember air quality. Right? And so in simple terms, it's like, hey, get some plants in there, and make sure that you crack a window so that you can get some fresh air in there. Because if you're waking up groggy every morning, it's either stuffy and it's bad air quality, or you're dehydrated, and your brain doesn't have you're not circulating enough good stuff inside your system to operate at peak levels. And so I'm all for staying hydrated. The American Medical Association, again, when I was researching my book, they estimated that 75%, that was the statistic. American Medical Association estimated 75% of Americans are chronically dehydrated, which chronically meaning, habitually dehydrated. And that's the kind of thing that causes organ failure over
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
That shortens life expectancy, chronic dehydration. Sure, you can get dehydrated. Body's resilient. You can recover from that. But if you're chronically dehydrated for years, no bueno.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so if your water tastes bad, you're not going to drink it. And so what can we do to get fresh, vitalizing water into your home, so that you can get in the habit, so you can support yourself in staying hydrated. So staying hydrated, good air quality, that's going to help a lot.
Would that be true with like shower water? Because I could imagine, if especially if you take hot showers or hot baths, like the last thing you want to do is inhale some of the chemicals that they use, in conventionally speaking, for
Yeah,
water
you can
purification.
smell the chlorine in some showers for sure. If there's a strong chlorine smell, then I would certainly get a filter on that.
Yeah.
I'm an architect, so I'm not a doctor. I need to stay in my lane
Right.
about things. I need to learn, so I can't make, prognoses or
Right.
diagnosis. Architecture is not medicine. I can't prevent disease with that. You know what I mean? It's like I
Um,
just I don't want to design in a bubble. I want to learn from the other professions and say, what have you learned about the science of human excellence? And is there anything that I can borrow and pull into my discipline? So, because the highest calling of architecture is to help people live happily ever after. I
um,
really want to help people live their best life, and not just say that as a cool slogan, but dive into what that actually means, so that, once you can identify metrics, then you can have targets that are achievable to go after. So, that's the whole process. So I would definitely say, filter out your water if it's has bad odors or bad tastes. Um, whether you've got a well, or whether you've got municipal water, have it tested. It doesn't cost too much, maybe $100, $50, and see what's in there, and take steps. It may be something as simple as a charcoal filter. It may be something more involved, a whole house filter, or whatever. Just you got to go on a case by case basis depending on where you are and what works for you.
yeah. And in terms of health, what are your thoughts on like EMFs? Because I've seen it on both sides. Like nothing to
Yeah,
be concerned about. You can have it all over your home. Cool. And the other kind of extremes, like no, it's problematic. You're
yeah,
radiating all the time. Yes, it might not cause cancer, but it will cause other disruptions in the nervous system, in the brain. Dot 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 dot.
yeah. So here's what's true. The body is at once highly sensitive, but also highly resilient. And so, yes, if you and sensitivity, the mind and the body and the spirit, is like a radio. and you can tune that station to a frequency. And so if you're hyper fixated on a specific thing, then you're going to get that. An example of this is like you buy a red car and suddenly you see red cars everywhere,
Everyone drive a red
right?
car. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The red cars, it's nothing changed except you tuned into that frequency.
Right on.
Right. And so now you're seeing it everywhere. The red cars were already there. You just didn't tune in because it wasn't relevant to you, but now it is. And so people can tune into something and get hyper fixated on something and almost, become obsessive about something. But I don't want to go down that road. I'm just talking about tuning in. You can tune your awareness in, whether it's your physical body or your mental body, you can tune in to what you choose. And so we can be highly sensitive. And if you tune into, EMFs, or if you're listening to your body and you feel like there's something in your environment that's adversely affecting you, look, we can recover. We're highly resilient. So the
Yeah.
body is sensitive, but also resilient. The problem is where we're inundated or immersed or things become chronic, like we have our fight or flight response. The adrenaline spikes up and it's like, okay, fine, you can recover, saber-toothed tiger, run away. But it's when it becomes chronic where it hits, you don't have time to reset and come back to baseline. That's when it becomes a problem and people get burned out over time. Their adrenals get hyperactivated and all the other stuff that those people, people that are experts in that I am not, but that tell us what to do. And so it's kind of the same thing. It's like focus on things that are within your control to solve. Don't worry about stuff that's not, and it's beneficial to become aware of things so that you can tune in because sometimes something could be affecting you negatively and you're still unconscious of it. You haven't tuned into it. You're not aware. So being aware of things is good. I think conscious home design is an essential life skill, just like knowing how to dress for the weather or prepare a nutritious meal. You should know a little bit about the mind body environment connection and how that works. So that you could make adjustments that serve you, right? Um, so that's, yeah. So being sensitive is good to a degree because it allows you to tune in and identify things that maybe you can change.
Right on.
But that said, if it's a small amount of stuff, then don't fixate too much on it. You can recover, not a big deal. Um, you got to do the best you can with what you have. Conscious home design is not an all or nothing proposition. Even
Like
little 2% shifts send the butterfly effect, those ripples compound over time and it can really help you out.
which I love that you actually put in your book, was
Oh,
it
yeah.
chaos theory? Yeah, that was really
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah. It says that while it's true that not all small things become big things,
Yeah.
all big things started as small things. And you can mathematically chart the algorithm, the logarithm of how big things started as small things and that compounding, that S curve that happens over time. And that's what we want to do. Even a little 2% shift. The difference between a 5% rate of return on your retirement account versus a 7% rate of return will double your results over time, right? Just that 2% will double the outcome. And so we're looking for ways, what could we do in every room of the house to create 10% more ease and grace, 10% less stress, 10% more feelings of support, like, hey, I'm on purpose. I'm in flow. My life is possible. If that
Let's
adds
break
up,
that Yeah, let's
yeah,
break that down a little bit because one of the things that stood out for me also many things stood out for me through your book is kind of the sensual nature of it, like how visual cues affect consciousness, how
right.
the physical structure of rooms that you're particularly in affect, you know, bedroom, lovemaking and sleeping, all the different
Sure.
things. Um,
Yeah.
you also talk about like, when you even buy um what for furniture. God, what was the example you gave?
Doorknob.
Doorknobs, thank you. I was like, I can see them as I'm looking over there, I can remember what they're called.
Yeah.
Like even that, like the quality of like when you touch it, how do you actually feel? Like spend
Mhm,
time making sure it
mhm,
feels right for you in that particular room, that
mhm,
or your house, whatever it happens to
mhm,
be, which I love.
mhm.
So kind of break some
Yeah,
down for me.
sure. Yeah, these are some surface things, that help us feel safe, or supported in our environment. Um, I like to. There was a high school teacher. He made a YouTube video where he had this jar, and he had rocks and pebbles and sand. And he was like, if you put in the sand and the pebbles and try to put the rocks on top, there's not enough room in the jar. But if you put the rocks in first, and then the
Mm.
pebbles and the sand, then they fill up all the nooks and crannies, and there's room for everything. It was a reminder of prioritizing. Prioritize the big stuff. Make sure you put the big stuff in your life in the jar first. And so, um, conscious home design is about that. So, like, what are the big things that really move the needle? And we find that, um, you know, relationships are huge. We find that a sense of purpose, beyond our physical needs of shelter, a kitchen, a bathroom, a bedroom, and a hangout space is the basic program of a home. What about personal development needs and self-growth? What about love and belonging and connection? What about creative expression? And so once we start factoring in things like that into the home and say, wow, what if we created an opportunity for you to develop your mind? What if we created an opportunity for you to express yourself creatively, whether it's just a hobby for yourself or whether it's something that you ultimately share with others, is almost irrelevant. That's a personal choice. It's just everyone needs to be creative in some way. And so, I'm going around and asking these good questions because if you ask a good question, you get a good answer. The quality of your outcomes are determined by the quality of your initial inquiry. So, the book is like, hey, here's the big idea, here's the important stuff, and the doorknobs and other, materiality and textures and colors, those are important things in curating an environment that feels good to you. One person says, hey, I like red. Another person says, hey, I like green. Fine. Those are things that we can work with. Underneath of that, the big stones are like the relationship, are the personal development. I find that if people aren't connected with with those pieces, if they're not finding creative avenues to exercise those drives, those human drives that we all have, then life isn't working and they're going to feel frustrated or like they're operating with one arm tied behind their back. And so if we can, cultivate our physical bodies, our mind, our mental bodies, and our creative spirit, in our homes intentionally, then those are the big stones that make happiness. And then once we have that, like the outfit that I mentioned before, if it's three, it could be the most beautiful outfit, but if it's three sizes too small, it's not going to serve you. And so, you know, putting painting the right color on a space that just doesn't work for your family isn't going to solve the problem. It can help, but it's not. It's like putting a band-aid on a
Yeah.
you know on something that needs stitches.
Right.
And so I really want to start with those big things and say, what can we do to help you feel like my life is possible? Because if you when life gets busy, Michael, and you're pressed for time and the world, family responsibilities, work responsibilities, is all raising their hand and trying to steal your attention away. The first thing that gets cut out is that creative activities or personal growth activities or even and then physical fitness activities. Things start to get pushed aside. Dad bod, it's real because you don't have time to go to the gym anymore, right? Fine, no problem. That's life. But if that persists, if that again happens for years and years and years and years, then it's gonna get out of balance, and you're gonna have to wake up and make a big change to recover what you lost. And so with conscious home design, I'm saying, what would happen if, look, I know you like to play the cello, and before you had kids or before you had that really high responsibility, high income job, you used to play an hour a day, but now you haven't picked it up in 3 years. Um, is there something we could do to create space, the opportunity to where if you only had 10 minutes,
Mm,
if your cello is locked in a case in the attic and you only have 10 minutes, forget it. It's not happening.
yeah.
But if it's set up in an alcove, that's comfortable and inviting, and you only have 10 minutes, well, you can just step in there and play one song or do some scales and keep the fingers limber. And even if you don't, just seeing that the cello is set up over there that's your environment signaling you that, what, things that matter to me, things that feed me, things that I value in my life are possible for me. I have the opportunity to go after the things that mean something to me. And that's a very hopeful outlook on life. Your environment is sending you, it's a positive feedback loop. It's sending you signals that yes, life works for me. It may not be perfect. I don't have an hour a day, but it's still there. I have a potential. Whereas if you feel like you don't have the potential, then instead of being hopeful, it's frustrated, and it can lead to hopelessness or despair in an extreme example, and depression, And so you don't want a depressing environment. You want to feel like your life, like you have the possibility to stretch and reach into your potential. We're always creating ourselves new. So that's
I
conscious
I
home
I
design.
love I love that. In my program, I call it via negativa, via positiva. In terms of
Okay.
our design, via negativa, what do we need to remove? Via
Yes.
positiva, what we need to add. And I love your
Nice.
example because I work with a client who was Greek Orthodox, wanted to kind of re-engage his religion, and literally created a room for meditation, prayer, reading.
There it is.
And because it was there and he saw it all the time and it had all the icons from his religious system, it was like it just opened that space for him. And it's almost
That's
like
right.
he has no excuse now. You know,
Sure.
athletic clients, I'm like, "Where are your running shoes if you're a runner?" "Oh, they're in the basement."
Yeah.
When you said in the basement, I'm like going, "Yeah, okay, I know you're never gonna run because 'cause they're in the basement."
That's right. Yeah. Out of
Love that.
sight, out of mind. It's a friction point. Yeah. Definitely. There's so much to unpack there about what you just said. Leonardo da Vinci painted the Mona Lisa. It's the most famous painting in the world. It's 500 years old. Everyone's heard of it by now.
Mhm.
But what's interesting about that painting is it took him more than a decade to finish it. He worked on it little by little. It wasn't just he sat down and a week later he had this masterpiece, right? And so when I found that out, studying art history, just part of my, diving into learning more about everything,
That's awesome.
it really, I said, oh my God, that tells the story right there. You know, he has an art studio. And so when he was called away to do other, paying gigs or something, other high priority work, or perhaps he was not feeling it, he wasn't having inspiration, he was able to just put it aside,
Mm.
put the painting aside and let it ripen. And then he could revisit it when he had time or inspiration and do a little bit more. But if he didn't have an art studio, it might not have ever gotten done. Look, if we didn't invent architecture, then we wouldn't be able to achieve anything that took longer than a sunny afternoon to accomplish. Because as soon as the weather changed or night came and wild animals came, it would mess everything up. And so the ability to control our environment allows us to build on yesterday's achievements.
Wow, that is I got okay, not this very second, but I'm actually gonna sit with that tonight. I think that's
Yeah.
as a like an evolutionary concept is
Yeah.
brilliant. I never thought of it that way.
So Seth Godin talked about the 10,000 hour rule.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so he's saying that, and we all know this, practice makes perfect, right? It takes time and effort to be accomplished at anything. But what's missing from that very common sense formula is it also takes space to
Yeah.
be accomplished at something. If you don't have a place to do that activity, to engage in, if you don't have a laboratory, if you don't have, technology, science, medicine, art, all of these things are possible because we built architecture to control our environment, dedicate space to an activity. And so dedicating space to something exponentially increases our chances for success in that. Not only does it say, hey, this is important to me, I prioritize it enough to do that, to create space for it, but it also allows us the opportunity to engage in that. And so if you say, hey, prayer and meditation is important to me, but you don't have a dedicated zone in your space, even if it's just an alcove or a corner screened off to do that activity, you're swimming an uphill battle to try to cultivate that habit and hit your targets, your stated goal. You need the environment to support you so that on the days where you're not feeling in the mood, you can step into that environment the environment will actually there's almost a Pavlovian response, just like your mouth will salivate going to the kitchen, you'll yawn going to the bedroom, and the living room, gives you conversation consciousness. Stepping into your prayer room or your meditation room or your gym is gonna spark that vibe, and so it will give you a lift and help you get in the zone, get in the flow. So it's
Love it.
definitely there's a psychosomatic effect there, as well as also just the simple physical thing of just providing the opportunity to do it. So it works on multiple levels. So good for your friend or your client for choosing that and having the capacity to actually dedicate a whole room to that activity, because not everyone does, right? Some people look, conscious home, if you're able to build a brand new home, it's a quantum leap, to the degree that you can create your home, you can create your future. And you can make rapid changes quickly by building a new home. If anyone wants to do that, visit my website, conscioushomedesign.com. Call me, reach out to me. I'll work with you, pick my brain and I'll be your architect or whatever consultation you need, anywhere in the country. But even if you're living in a rented apartment and you have no plans or for whatever reason, you have no desire to make any big changes and you're not going to hire an architect, because most people won't hire an architect in their lives. Most people are going to do the best they can with the walls they have. There's still little shifts that you can do that are gonna, like with the butterfly effect, add up and compound over time and have big dividends, and big results in your life. And so those are things like putting the plants in there for the green space, changing the doorknobs or things that are more comfortable to hold on to. So it's not an irritation. It turns friction into flow. Um, look for the Conscious Home Design book is the big idea. The workbook is asking those quality questions to say, what would that look like for me personally as an individual? And then you go through the assessment and you can see where the gaps are. Here's where I'm well supported. Here's where I need more help. And the low hanging fruit, it might look different from one person to another. One person might have that thing that, I got that buttoned up, but the other person has a big hole in that spot. So we're not all equal. So Conscious Home Design is going to meet you where you are. But once you do the assessment, you can look around and say, oh, here's where I need to make a little adjustment. And then you do and see what that feels like, and it's like surfing, it's a trial and error and you find your way. Some people are updating their homes every spring, it seems like, spring cleaning and readjusting and redecorating. And some people are just, they find what they love and they just preserve it for 20 years. It's whatever works for your rhythm and flow. But as long as you're doing it intentionally, that's the message.
Let's bring some intentionality to the bedroom, where
Okay,
people spend
sure.
between 7 and 9 hours, depending who
Yeah,
and their partner.
right.
But I
We
think
can talk
talk
about the
about like,
bedroom.
bedroom as a place for connection with your spouse or your partner,
Yeah,
also for sleep, the importance of sleep, which
sure.
obviously in our culture is not held in high esteem. It's something you really should spend a lot of effort in, not effort
Yeah.
on effort sleep, but like it's an important part of being healthy and happy. Talk to about the bedroom and questions people should consider as they either think about building a bedroom or redesigning their bedroom.
Okay. There's so much. The bedroom is such a rich space because, um, A, we spend a lot of time there, and B, it's it's a very intimate space. It's a place where we're at our most vulnerable, we're asleep, naked, physically and metaphorically. Um, and for those of us that are sharing our bedrooms with others, it's a very deep personal relationship connection opportunity. So relationships take work, but it's so much easier to show up fully in a relationship when you're feeling centered yourself. And so, I talked earlier about the sacrifices that happen in a busy life and people neglecting their creative outlook or their their personal growth activities and stuff. And so, and you see this happen if a man is working. I'm going to use some very traditional gender roles just for the sake of things. But if a man is working very hard, he's hitting upper management level or CEO level, and he's just working 14 hours a day and just carries a lot of responsibility. That's a giving role, working hard and providing, job security for your employees, but and providing money and security for your family. You're giving, giving, giving all the time, and you're not being fed very much. Yes, your work may feed you, but you may not be doing some of the things that actually you may not be reinvesting in yourself. And so a piece of you might be starving. You might look very successful on the outside, but you may be starving on the inside. Now, what about a stay-at-home mom? She's got young kids, and she's just giving, 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 giving all the time. She also may be starving. You have an example. The perfect family on the outside may be examples of everyone starving to death because they're
Yeah.
not being fed. Now, people that are starving to death, when they come to the bedroom, they're going to have a hard time being fully vulnerable and intimate because their body or some part of their psyche is screaming at them, I'm starving, I'm needy, I'm not getting what I need. How can they show up and give when they've been giving all day long? Difficult. So conscious home design is saying, look, what kind of activities feed you as an individual? Let's build opportunities to do those things into your home so they don't get put on the back burner for years and you wake up one day going, oh my god, I'm malnourished. Like, what can we do to keep you sustained? So showing up into the bedroom, the hip bone is connected to the leg bone. It's all interconnected. And so if you have a rich, full, connected life, your bedroom life is going to be so much more successful as well. So that's just sort of this fundamental, big picture, deep rooted philosophy behind it, because again, we don't want to put band-aids on a chainsaw wound, right? We've got to look at how can we work with the integrated whole, the whole ecosystem of the home and your life and be well supported. So that's just sort of the back story. On the face, well, we talked about having good water, staying hydrated. That's the sleep that you do get is going to be more effective and you're going to wake up, more ready to go and less groggy. I wake up with the first thing I do is drink water in the morning. It helps turn me on and activate. Yeah. Not coffee, but water. And I can just feel I take a sip of water in the morning and my brain just goes, it boots up, from a sip of water. And fresh air. Having fresh air in the bedroom is going to help too. So those are some physiological things you can do. Now, here's a challenge that, again, going back to the traditional, hetero relationship and those and extreme examples of masculine and feminine, but ladies don't want to go to bed in Castle Grayskull, and guys don't want to go to bed in Barbie Cloud Palace, right? And so creating an atmosphere, creating a design that both masculine and feminine, sensibilities are going to feel comfortable in.
Nice.
That's about harmony. That's relationship harmony there. Both people want to have an aesthetic style that's going to work for them where they can feel comfortable because you want to be able to relax. If one person is the driver behind the design and you end up saying, if you let one person drive the design of a common space and the other person hates it, then that's a problem, because you say, well, the bedroom, our stated goal is to be able to have a place where we can actually connect with each other. And yet one person hates the environment. You've defeated what you said your goal was because you got distracted by shiny object syndrome and you saw a pretty thing on Pinterest and you wanted to have that style because that would make you feel really good. So you got to find so the I encourage everyone, all of my clients, not just the point of contact that, the primary point of contact, but the whole household, even kids, hey, do the workbook with your parents, do it together as an exercise and let me see what everybody wants. And I'll look for the overlapping things. And part of the art and science of architecture is to take these things and draw from them and find the overlapping bits and build on those strengths so that we can create spaces that everybody feels safe in. Sure, if you're a kid and it's your own bedroom, you can paint it pink, or you can put sports things up, or whatever your interests are. You can make it just yours. But if you're sharing, if you have common spaces like the family room, then everyone needs to feel welcome there, or a shared bedroom, then it needs to work for everybody. So that's yeah, that's how that works.
I love that. I really want to encourage people to read the book, do the workbook, because there's like we just touch upon the surface of
Oh
all
yeah,
the great ways to
yeah,
be more conscious in terms of your own home design. And like you
yeah,
said, whether you're building a new home, obviously call you, Taylor, and that you can help do that.
sure.
People like your way of thinking um, helps anyone. They're already renting a home or they already own a home. They're not building a new home, or they're renting an apartment or a condo or a townhouse. Like all this stuff that we've been talking through, and then a thousand other things are useful things to think through to make your home, really supportive, as you said, like your health and well-being and connection and all that kind of beautiful things. Where can people learn more about your work?
Yeah, conscioushomdesign.com is my homepage. Um, like I said before, it's an essential life skill. Everyone, read the book. It's very accessible. You can read it in about an hour. There's a instant digital download there. You can get the book, the workbook, and the audio book. So if you like to listen while you're exercising or driving, you don't want to read, but the book is easy to read. You can read it in about an hour. I would encourage anyone to get that, just so they know, because that will upgrade their lens, and you'll never look at a space the same way, once you've done that work. And so, whoops, sorry about that. I forgot to mute my I forgot to mute that pop up. Um, Everyone is going to benefit, whether they hire an architect or not, from going through their own personal assessment of who they are and what they need and how their space can support that. And again, it's asking those right questions. Because look, most people have not done the Dharma. It's not their Dharma to be an architect. They haven't spent 20,000 hours, in the industry, And so we shortcut our success when we hire experts to help us. Right. That's
Mhm.
why we hire coaches and doctors and lawyers and architects, because they're going to get us there faster. Sure, you're smart, you could figure it out yourself, but why take the time? You know, and so um, I've asked the questions that you probably forgot to ask, or didn't even know you were supposed to ask, or could ask in the first place, because you haven't spent tens of thousands of hours going down that rabbit hole. And so the conscious home design book and workbook will ask you questions. I think we all like to do these little discovery things, like what's my astrology, or what's my um, Myers-Briggs type, or my MBTA, or MBTI, or what's the other one, the DISC assessment, or
Program
the human design. I mean, there's so many
design.
different
Yeah,
things that you can, aptitude tests and things that you can do it, and they're fun because you go through it and you're like, oh wow, yeah, I always knew that about myself, but now I see that I thought that was just a quirk of me, but no, I'm normal. I fit right in. That's they, and so it's nice. It's a process of self-discovery. Doing the conscious home design workbook is similar. It's going to bring things up that and put them into writing. It's like suddenly that clarity comes, and when with clarity comes confidence, and confidence is speed, because you now know, you now feel safe to take action on something. So if you find yourself, you know, procrastinating or stuck in a holding pattern, it's probably because you don't have clarity about something. And so going through the workbook can help you get clarity about, oh, here's what I need in my space. Here's things that I can do, and just do those little shifts and see what it feels like. So
I love that.
conscioushomedesign.com.
Thank you, Taylor. This has been a fantastic conversation. I definitely encourage literally everyone, because everyone lives somewhere in some, a
Yeah.
home or apartment or a townhouse, or
Yep.
want to build a home, they should call you. Definitely check out
Sure.
Conscious Home Design. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Good to be here.